Hey Sheldon, it has been a minute. How are you doing?
Yeah, it's good to see you. Good to see you.
Yeah, quite a bit
There-
has.
There's a delay. There's a delay there. I can hear better now.
Okay, yeah. I mean, as I said, quite a bit has seems to have happened since turn of the year. We've got the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nominees. We've got the recent Grammys where Beyonce made history, and also they had that interview. I had the interview with Clurel Henderson, the from Kids at Work, who kind of filled in quite a bit of a gap between things that we heard from Timmy, things we've been hearing from Teddy, and he kind of seemed like he filled in some space in there. But wanted to see where we should start off with.
We can start with the Clarell Henderson interview. That was really good. I watched it and listening to him. He's a great singer. Interesting stories that he told. So when I listened to him and I listened to him sing, and he was talking about some things he was sharing with you, like his friends were saying, okay, what would have happened if he wound up being the lead singer? I think it was Groovy and one of the other records. So it's unique to kind of to think about what their fate would have been if Aaron wasn't in the picture. Clarell's interview was really good because, like you said, he filled in a lot of gaps in terms of what they were doing, how they were coming up as a group, which is very important because, we've heard a lot of different stories about Kids at Work. So when you have another perspective, it kind of fleshes out that whole proto New Jack Swing.
Yeah, with Corel, what were you saying?
Yeah, he kind of closed the gap, so to speak, with that whole. It was like a whole proto New Jack Swing story in terms of how those guys, they got in the business and the dynamic that existed between the three. I think that was very unique because obviously when you have singers in groups, especially like lead singers, the group has a unique identity, and when you have that lead singer, whoever's doing the music, everything is filtered through lead singers. I talked about this before, before they used to, in the 70s, there used to be bands, and then they went ahead and they got a lead singer, and the lead singer became the focus. But then the sound was filtered through the lead singer, and it kind of shaped the identity of the band. So, you know, what the group would have been like had they continued on with him. But it's been interesting to see.
Yeah, he also mentioned that his style of singing is akin to Ralph Tresvant, Ralph, and
Yes.
and it seems as if when we got to the 90s, the sort of Johnny Gill, the sort of Aaron Hall, the sort of male strong vocalist took over. Even when I spoke to Hadestown, and Shazam said the same thing, that his voice was similar to that Ralph, but that Dino had the more grittier voice, and that's why his sound fitted into the 90s. So I do wonder how Clurel might have made that. And he seemed like he was like, "Nah, man, I want to stay in the 80s. I want to keep my head into Jericho." Like,
right. Yes. And see, that was the thing, and I didn't want to step on you because I was going to go ahead and bring that up. But obviously, he was influenced Elder Barge, that whole 80s vibe.
Yeah.
He had the hair and all of that. And again, when you start looking at singers, in the 80s, you saw a change. In the 70s, you saw a lot of deeper voice, gruff voice singers, people like Teddy Pendergrass and stuff like that. But then after Teddy Pendergrass got into his accident in 82, there was a shift. So gradually the whole falsetto tenor vibe was coming in, Howard Hewitts and people like that. And one of the things is that the gruff voice, deep voice, the R&B, the masculinity, a lot of times that didn't really register over on the pop side. When you look at how black music was, the more masculine it looked, it sounded, it wasn't really palatable or marketable for the pop side. So it was like all the tenor voices that were coming out in the 80s, the whole sound was a softer sound. You know, that was seen like it was more marketable, because when you look at the whole aspect of Black masculinity, Black sexuality from a male perspective, all of that stuff, you know, that scared a lot of people. You know, it's always been that way. That's why, you know, you had, when the rock and roll groups were coming out, they were copying off the white groups, and they were kind of like a tamer version of what the Black groups were. So if you saw Little Richard come out doing his thing, and he was kind of raw, even though he had the falsetto. Pat Boone remakes his records, you start seeing that trend like that. So when you see like Black music, Black singers, deep, rough, you know, they have a masculine look, it didn't register on the pop side. Labels weren't really trying to cross those guys over like that. Those groups, anybody that have like an overly Black look, but in the 80s, you started to see the look start to soften up. You saw the Jerry curls, you know, the wardrobe, and you know, you didn't hear a lot of rough voices. Everything was really pretty and soft, and it was very genteel. So what happened was, toward the end of the 80s, when Guy comes in, Guy kind of reactivates that sound courtesy of Aaron Hall, because obviously Aaron Hall is coming out of Charlie Wilson and the Stevie Wonder and the Donny Hathaway, and those three individuals, at least Donny Hathaway, Sly Stone, and Stevie Wonder, they influenced Charlie Wilson in his style. So when Aaron came, now he represented that gap, because also at the same time Guy was coming out, you saw a young fan base that was coming in. And again, you know, you got to give the Ralph Tresvant component, you know, he's first. So he's making that connection with the young audience. So anybody that's trying to sing, you know, they're maybe patting themselves off of Ralph Tresvant, who's a spinoff of Michael Jackson. So Michael Jackson has that tenor voice. So that's the vibe. El DeBarge is out. So that's the influence. So maybe when you look in terms of what Guy would have been, we don't know. I mean, what it would have been. But I think that when you look at the music coming out, it makes me wonder the mixture between Clurel's voice and the harder sound. I wonder how that would have kind of vibed, because Aaron had that voice that was really compatible for Teddy's beats. You know, think about it, is that you had Keith had a voice like that, and Keith started out as a falsetto. His natural voice is a tenor falsetto. You know, if you go back and listen to one of his records, he came out with, he had an album called Just Me. It came out like in 2004, 2005.
I mean, in 1984, 85?
2005, 2004, 2005. And he had a song where he's singing.
Oh, a new. So you're talking about something new he came out with 2004, 2005.
Well, but he's been putting out albums forever, you know, but there's a period of time though where he's singing in his falsetto voice. I got to send you the link. The song is called, they sample Blue Magic. They sample Blue Magic, one of the old 1970s Philadelphia soul records. And Keith is singing in falsetto. So his falsetto tenor, that was his original voice, but him coming in singing that, like the I Wanna and all of that, that's like kind of a new thing, you know, in terms of that, because his natural voice was something else. So he's singing like Jackie McGee. He's singing that Steve Arrington from Slave, just a little bit, Steve Arrington. He's singing through that, got that nasal tone, and that's the trademark that he came out with, but you know, that he came with. But he had a tenor falsetto type, because again, Keith Sweat comes out of the era with the falsetto stand-up groups, Blue Magic and the Stylistics and all that. That's his era. So when I send you the clips, when I send you the video, you're gonna be like, okay, you know, I never knew he could sing like that.
Well, he did say that Teddy, I think Teddy did say that he wanted him to sing in this nasally voice because he felt it fitted the record. So he wanted him to switch his voice. So so that's why it puts one and one together. And I'm probably, because when you do even listen to Timmy Gatlin saying he heard Aaron and he says he quit his job because he felt this is it, this is what we need. in some cases, it then gets me to wonder if they didn't feel Clurel's voice could take them to the next level, because they see Aaron and everyone says we're in, and they didn't sort of try and go back with Clurel. So it might have seemed as if the voice is something that at the time must have been something that Teddy realized is for what he wants to create, he needs a certain voice that can fit it. You know, Ali, Bobby Brown, or Aaron.
Well, based on what the story Timmy was talking about, you know, Clurel had long been out of the picture. And when he hooked up with Aaron and he heard him, he can sing. Because again, Timmy has that tenor falsetto voice, you know, but then you see the other with Aaron coming, it adds a whole different dimension. But if you go back and you listen to Timmy's interview he did with you, and also the Jacked interview on Spotify, when they had Aaron do his thing, people weren't taken to it, because they were like, oh man, you're the Gap Band, you trying to turn back the hands of time. So it wasn't like people heard Aaron's voice. It was like, okay, you know, at this time the Gap Band was kind of fading out. So with Aaron singing like that, it was like a throwback to Charlie Wilson. And Charlie Wilson wasn't the Charlie Wilson that we know Charlie Wilson now. The Gap Band kind of like, it had peaked. So right around 85-ish, 86, they were starting to come down to earth. You know, that late 70s, mid 80s was their pocket. So at the time, Charlie had that voice. You go back, it was like the Luther Vandross, Michael Jackson, Jeffrey Osborne, you know, El DeBarge. So you didn't have a lot of rough masculine voices that were out, that, you know, like an Otis Redding types, that was gone. So the music kind of like, it was more, I don't want to say softer, but a lot of the aggressiveness was taken out of the music, because it was more about now trying to cross over, trying to get a wider audience. But at the same time, if you look at that, there's a lot of groups who were like, they had like Stars, one group like that. They were a band and they had a lot of members or whatever, and they would do funky dance music. But right around in the 80s, all of these groups that like had a band sound, they all were singing like pretty ballads. You know, they were like Secret Lovers and Always and all these and stuff like that. It was, and people were kind of pissed off. Kool and the Gang is a perfect example. Kool and the Gang in the 70s were a funk band, but they got their greatest success in the 80s. But a lot of people, you know, they love Kool and the Gang, but the diehard fans were like, nah, man, this is soft music. This is the pretty music or whatever. We like what we had in the 70s, even though Kool and the Gang was the biggest band in the 80s. You know, so it was kind of when you get the whole black music vibe back then, it was just, you know, it was changing. And when Aaron came, he brought the masculinity back. He brought the runs back, but also he opened the door for non-technical singers to actually come in, because now you didn't necessarily have to be singing in a choir. You didn't have to be technically skilled, because as young people, it was the visual, it was the sound. So we didn't need Aaron to be Luther Vandross. If you heard Luther Vandross's records, he's a technical singer, very precise, very pristine sound. You know, Aaron was a perfect match for that. But I'm thinking, had Clurel stayed in the picture, Guy would have been like an extension of the Kids at Work. And of course, the music would have probably been an extension of maybe what New Edition was, you know. But one of the things in the interview you talked about was that they didn't want him to sing. There was a period of time in the interview, Clurel was talking about, I think he said that they didn't want him to sing lead. You remember? Or was it Timmy?
It was Timmy. He said that Gene didn't want Timmy to sing lead. He was like,
that's what it was, because Clurel at the time, he had the commercial sounding voice, the voice, like all of them maybe could sing, but he had that voice that was right in line with whatever the music was out. So he was like a Ralph Tresvant type guy. So but he said he was a guy, he was like in the 80s. That was his vibe. Jerry Curl, so 09 and all that. So who knows what it would have been like if they would have been able to transition, would have been just a group that just would have been out. But you know, but Aaron was Aaron was the, he was the common denominator for the new sound that they had,
Yeah.
And it opened the door, because if there's no Aaron, there's no Big Bub, there is no KC, there is no, a lot of these guys, Calvin Richardson. There's a period of time, I would say between 88 and about maybe 95. There's a period of time where everything is like that Aaron Hall Shamba, that people are singing like him, the vocal arrangements, the whole nine. Even like the lower echelon R&B groups at the time, they're singing like Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, Jodeci were influenced by them. But anyway, guys, let's know your thoughts. If you get to listen to Clurel Henderson, he did admit at one time that Teddy had asked him to come and replace Aaron Hall when Aaron and Gene Griffin had a fallen out. Now, the reason why I believe that, because when I interviewed Mucho a while back, he mentioned that Dizzo, Darrell Allen, was also in the frame to replace Aaron Hall. So it seems as if Aaron and Gene were almost at that cost where Gene was constantly looking at, if we need to make a change, then I need to be prepared, because it seems as if Aaron was on thin ice at that time. But then I think no sooner had Teddy sort of fired Gene, broken up with Gene, that things changed as a group. But anyway, let us know what you think about the Clurel interview, whether it filled in some of the gaps that you've had with the whole New Jack Swing, Teddy Riley, new Kids at Work guy sort of thing. And we'll catch up on another episode at another time. All right, guys. Hey guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed what you saw. Please remember to like, share, comment, and most importantly, subscribe. Turn on the notification so you can always be alerted when we have a new video. But thanks for watching. Till next time.